Hey guys, welcome to another episode of LMH Chop Shop. This week we're putting a HELLCAT Supercharger on an LS1 for the DeSoto. So this is a 2.3 litre supercharger. This one specifically is off of a TRX, which is the big Ram Dodge. So it's the same as what comes on the Dodge HELLCAT. So it's taken 4 months from the day I messaged the seller to right now is 4 months. So I was going to wait to show you guys what engine was going in this until I had this. And I kept getting told it's going to be another week, it's going to be another week, it's going to be another week. And I reckon it was 2 months on from that point. So this thing has taken quite a long time to get here. It wasn't cheap, but it was cheaper than buying one locally, but it's here now. It came with upgraded injectors, ID 1050s. So there's a set of those in there already. It's got the upgraded ZPE pulley. I think this is a 2.8 inch one, which is half an inch smaller than the stock HELLCAT size. There is smaller ones, so if we don't make enough power, we can go to a smaller one later. But for now, this will be plenty. I've since bought a bunch of supporting mods to go with this, but let's have a look at it. So with this supercharger, we're retaining the stock boost bypass valve. I'm not 100% sure what the correct name is for it, but all it does is when you are idling or at low RPM, this is open. It lets the air pass the supercharger and through into the intercooler and into the engine, so that when you're idling, you're not making heaps of boost and putting heaps of draw on your engine. Then as you open the accelerator, this sees more pressure or whatever, and it'll close up and let the boost go into the supercharger, or the air go into the supercharger, make a boost and go into your engine. So this is pretty cool, and a lot of this stuff that I'm going to talk about today is from DJ Tuning. So he's from the States, he's been super helpful. I've been messaging him at all hours of the night and hassling him for silly questions, and he's been more than polite and very helpful. So check out DJ Tuning if you want some stuff. So he makes a small kit which is for the boost bypass valve. So there's a small, I'm going to call it an Arduino, I don't know, little computer chip in here. All this does is interrupt the coil or the injector wiring, and then it plugs into the boost control valve, and it uses the fire rate of the coils or the injector, I can't remember, I'll clarify it. But it uses that boost, that pulse, and the speed of that pulse to determine how open the boost bypass is or closed. So that's a super handy piece. There's a few companies that do a manual one, so if you want a vacuum operated one, there is options out there, but using the original one would be ideal, I think, which is why I went with this piece. So then I hassled DJ and asked him to make me a pulley adapter. So a few other companies make these for LSA and for the truck offset. This is a pulley spacer. So what it does is just put this pulley on the front of the supercharger in line with the belts for an LSA or a truck. Now, unfortunately, those two are kind of hard to get in Australia. We can get LSA stuff, but it is kind of expensive. So what I've got in my hand is for a Commodore setup. So VT to VY, VZ. This is the same as a F-body Camaro. So if you guys need one for your Commodore stuff, or you want to put this on your Commodore, that's what you need. So hit up DJ and ask specifically for this, because he doesn't actually offer it. I just asked and he delivered. He's a champ. So good piece of kit. Now the supercharger that I bought already came with a ZPE pulley, so I can actually reuse the pulley itself because it's a HELLCAT offset pulley, which is what we need. I just need to change the hub over. So this already has the HELLCAT hub on it. That can go in the bin, and I'll put the Commodore hub on there. Just put the pulley back on, and it will move the pulley millimeters, I imagine, but it gets it in the right spot. The supercharger also came with all of the bolts to bolt it down to the manifold, and they are like 200mm long. So if you can get those with the supercharger, that's great. If you can't, there is titanium versions available, and there is titanium versions available that are an inch longer, so you can put a interchiller or something under there, but we don't need that. We're already going to struggle with bonnet height enough, which I've spoken about in the past episodes with the suspension for the DeSoto. We've made it as low as we can, all the suspension as low as we can, because this thing sits very high. So my lovely cameraman Jackson has just pointed out, the reason that we have this wiring loom is because I'd like to try and keep the stock Commodore loom and ECU. Now the Commodore ECU is tunable and you can delete security systems and standalones. We've all seen that before. I've done it before on this channel, but because we're trying to keep everything stock just for a laugh, just to see if it actually works, that's why you need this. So because we don't have the HELLCAT ECU, you can't control the bypass, whereas if you have this little guy, it does it for you. So this is a LS1 engine from a VX Commodore. So Dale built this for me on the channel previously, and it is pretty much ready to go. Still needs to get a cam and some lifters and stuff. Don't worry about that. So we've got nice clean rocker covers. We've got a nice clean valley cover. So I'll chuck those on quickly and I'll cut off some plastic and reveal these adapters. So these bolted to the top of this engine are the DJ tuning adapters. So these go from a cathedral port LS head, he does have square port options available, to the correct spacing and offset and all that stuff for the HELLCAT Supercharger. Now these things are, I believe, cast alley, not 100% sure. They use the stock LT truck style intake gasket, which holds everything in the right spot. Uses some bolts that are provided to hold on to the engine the same way the stock intake would, and then you need to put the HELLCAT Supercharger on top. So there is another gasket in here. I'll grab the part number in a second, and then we'll get the Supercharger and put it on top. So we just started trying to put the bolts in. So we can get a couple to line up, no worries. But then the other side is off by like 5 or 10 mil, which is quite a lot. So we're wondering if the LT gaskets that were provided with the kit are either not correct, or maybe the heads are different on truck stuff, or maybe these have missed a stage of machining or something maybe. So I think we're gonna take it off. We'll take the adapters off and then sort of loosely fit everything and see if we can do it without an intake gasket, because this just does not want to line up. So we'll investigate and get back to you. So this is the truck style intake gasket that we were talking about. They have these little returns for the bolts. So we think what's happening is they're actually sitting on the bolts that we have, which are aftermarket bolts, and actually pushing the gasket too high up the head. So what we're going to do is just cut with tin snips, just take off that tab, try and do it kind of nicely. I tried to make Jackson do it, but he wouldn't do it. Just like that. So that allows this to slide down a little bit lower and actually lines up a lot better. So I think that might have been our problem. So maybe even those tabs, if they were a bit flatter or something like that, or different bolts, that might fix your problem. So we've been playing with the HELLCAT blower, and these adapters do fit and they do line up, and it's mint. We've got all the bolts in right now. The problem is when you do these up, they actually tilt a little bit. So I don't know how you're supposed to account for that with the blower off of it, because you have to do these up before you put the blower on, but that's what we need to do. But it does fit very nicely, but it's all just loose. So we need to work out how that works. And I've just measured 85 times, and from the top of the block in here to the top of the blower is 13 7/8 inches, which is about 352 millimeters from the top of the block there to the top of the Supercharger, which is pretty silly. And this thing is quite massive now. I like it. So I've had a couple of sleeps since the last clip. I've spoken to DJ again, and he said that these should be torqued to 10 Newton meters. We were going to 15, so I wouldn't think that would make a huge difference. I've just played around with it now, and even at 10, I couldn't get it to line up. So I undid everything again, pushed the intake manifold gasket in as far as I could, and then did them up to 10, and they all seem to line up nice. So I think the intake gasket is more the problem than the torque specs, but I have, however, somehow broken a 6mm bolt in the intake, so it's in the head, and I was using a torque wrench and I only went up to 15. So not heaps sure how that's happened, but we need to solve that now. but it all lines up. So now I need to take it all off again, fix that bolt, put the intake gaskets in and all that sort of stuff. But proof of concept, at least. It does seem to line up now. But this is going to be the throttle body adapter from LS to HELLCAT. So I've just been jumping through this and making a quick TikTok video for this. So if you haven't seen the TikTok, go check it out. It'll also be on YouTube Shorts. So what I need to do, I'm up to the last step. I need to countersink the head of these bolts. So I need to drill these holes out about half the thickness of this metal. So if I mess this up now, then I'm going to have to start again or fix it in some crude way, but I hope I don't mess it up. Let's get into it. Nailed it. I am really happy with that port match. It's not quite right, but it's very good for what I'm doing. I'm happy with that. I should probably put this throttle blade back in, I guess. So all finished up with the adapter. So I would like to clean up a few edges and cut a few pieces off, but that's a later problem. I've put the throttle blade back in there, and overall it took me about 3.5 to 4 hours. I bought that piece of aluminium for 88 bucks. So let's call this 20 because there's heaps left over. So instead of paying 180 US, I paid $20 Australian and a couple of hours. So I'm really stoked with that. Very happy. So I didn't film it because I wasn't sure it was going to work, but I've drilled out the snapped bolt. I've got a thread back in there, so now I'm going to try and test fit the manifold and see if it all lines up again. I've got new bolts. These are 12.9 mild steel zinc, so they're better than the stainless ones. They shouldn't gall up as well, so I'll go grab the manifold and hopefully bolt it on. Boy, was that a mission. So the bolt that I fixed, I put it all back together, snapped another bolt. I don't know what's going on. So I pulled it all out, I drilled it out, I've helicoiled it, put it all back together, and now it's all sweet. So I don't know what was going on and why the bolts snapped, but here we are. And then got the throttle body on there. So I do want to clean up these edges. I'll do that later. And then I threw the rocker covers on just for a look and the filler. So it's looking pretty good. Lots more to do, obviously, but I'm pretty happy with that. So there still needs to be gaskets in underneath the supercharger, but the intake to the head is actually done. So I need to put those gaskets in. The valley cover or valley plate is not in there, so that has to come off again anyway. But that's pretty good. What a good day's work. Other than the snap bolt that took me like 6 hours. So before I go inside for tonight, I decided to take the adapter off and mark out what I need to cut off. So they are the pieces, and that should make it a whole lot nicer. So that's a tomorrow job, but I'm pretty happy with the progress today. So it's been a few days since I last filmed. I've had time to actually clean up the shed for once. So everything's been moved around, and I also had time to put the blower on properly and make everything seat and seal nicely. So I just wanted to bring up with those adapters, they do fit. They fit really well actually. You just need to push the intake manifold gasket down to the bottom of the bolt. So I had to take the little tab off that holds onto the head bolt. You may or may not have to do that. So just a heads up, if you do get these adapters, you might have to deal with that. But once I got that done, seated properly, and then lower the blower down, I used the hoist. And then I started all of the bolts with it sort of like an inch off, just so you could just get started and everything lines up. And then once they're all started, lower the blower down and then put the bolts in. So worked really well. I don't know how you'd manage to do it in the car. You probably could, but you'd need a couple of mates and a fair bit of patience, I imagine, because it's quite tricky. But I'll show you what the engine looks like now because I've dressed it up. So it's a bit awkward because there's a bunch of stuff in the way, but we've got the headers on, got the rocker covers on properly with all the gaskets and everything. This guy's bolted down properly. I trimmed the throttle body adapter and it looks so much better. It doesn't have that silly big bulbous bit around the back, so that's all trimmed up. Now all fits really quite nicely. Can't really see much of that, but looks really good. So now the blower is on for good until this thing runs, I think. We'll see how we go. We might have to pull it off again. But I've got all the knock sensors in there, the valley plate, all that sort of stuff. We swapped over the hub I'll chuck in some footage of that now. So I'm just swapping over the pulley on the front of the blower here. This is the original one, so this is HELLCAT offset. And this one here is from DJ Tuning. So basically the same thing, just a little bit different offset. So this fella will bring it out to VT Commodore offset, and then we can line all the belts up. So I'm just going to change over this pulley adapter here. So this one here is the HELLCAT one. And this one is Commodore spacing, or F-body Camaro. And this thing's pretty much ready to go. So still needs a cam, still needs push rods, still needs a oil pump and a few other little bits and pieces for the front, but as a whole, it's pretty much there. Which brings me to the next part that I just bought. So I finally bought a transmission. So this is the 4L80 I borrowed off of Dale's dad to mock fit everything. That's the box of internals that came with that trans. And then this one is the one that he bought to replace this one, because this one's smashed and broken. So he's decided to go a different direction with his project. So I snapped up the 4L80E. So that still has all the electrics in it. So my plan is to upgrade the clutch packs and then just make it so you can put it in drive and it just works rather than a fully manualized setup. So hopefully that's good to go. I will get it rebuilt and strengthened and stuff, but now we have a mock-up gearbox and we have a good gearbox, so I can cut tabs off and stuff without feeling bad, and I can actually put it back in the chassis when that's ready. But this one did come with a bunch of spares, so we got a spare internal wiring loom, we got a couple of the clutch packs and all of the transmission magic. So we should have all of the bits we need to make a second gearbox if we really need to. So I don't know how much of that stuff we're going to need, but we have it all, so that's pretty awesome. And funny enough, there's one piece that came with this thing that I'm more excited about than all of this. Finally got a transmission yoke. So I spoke about trying to find one in a previous episode, and this transmission came with one, which is great, and it came with the tail shaft half. So I need to chuck this in the lathe and make it a bit nicer so I can work with it. But the plan is to just cut off that last little bit of tail shaft, and then I can mock up my own tail shaft from there. So super stoked that I got this with the transmission. I just need to pull it apart, clean it up, and then I can mock stuff up once the chassis is back in the shed. And if you are eagle-eyed enough to notice that there wasn't all the parts there, here are the rest of them. So if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching this episode. It's been quite an expensive one, as you can tell by the supercharger and all of the adapters and everything. So if you've liked it, please subscribe and come back for more DeSoto madness. But thank you very much for watching either way, and we'll see you next week.